Hi, this is Mike from Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and on today's video we'll be taking a look at the NZXT Kraken X63, a 280mm AIO, which aims to cool down your processor. But is it any good? Let's find out. Okay, so in today's video we'll be taking a look at the NZXT Kraken X63 280mm AIO Radiator. This one's actually been very popular for quite a long time. I've never actually got around to using any NZXT products. The CAM software, the CAM whole ecosystem, I've been completely out of the loop on. Whether it's because they're relatively expensive or it's got a certain kind of design ethic, I'm not entirely sure what it is. But fortunately for us, one of our regulars, Dave Aitken, actually has bought this for a PC build he's doing for his office. And he said, would you like to take a look at it, do a quick unboxing and see what you think? So it seemed like an ultimate opportunity. I don't have to spend any money, so I can test it, see what it's like, see what my thoughts are, and actually work out whether or not the NZXT ecosystem is right for me. So we're going to go through, do an unboxing, we'll do some testing. We've got a Ryzen 9 3900X processor we're going to test this on, see what the temperatures are like and all that kind of good stuff. Yeah, just basically find out a little bit more about NZXT's Kraken and if it's all it's cracked up to be. So let's get on with the unboxing experience. So as you can see, obviously it does come in nice packaging. NZXT do a really good job of their retail packaging. No complaints there. And as you can see on the front, Kraken X63 gives you an idea of what it looks like. This doesn't have RGB on the fans, does have a little splash of RGB actually on the pump head itself, and that is rotatable through 360 degrees in kind of increments of 30 degrees, so you should be able to get the NZXT logo to look exactly right in your system, depending how you mount the pump, whether or not you have it in the kind of traditional way. But anyway, we'll check that out later as we go through. On the side of the box, it goes through some of the specifications of the unit, so I'll try and give you a close-up of that. But essentially it goes through the sockets it's compatible with, and also the fans, the pump, etc, etc. This is based around the Asus Tech 7th generation, so yeah, pretty good, and obviously the 7th gen, it's come on quite a good way. Low noise, high efficiency, all that kind of good stuff. Fan-wise, we've got two 140mm fans. They are the Air P140s, and they have a rotational speed of somewhere between around about 300 RPM to 1800 RPM, plus or minus 300 RPM, which I think is a little bit of an exaggeration, but anyway. Pump-wise, you're looking at similar sort of specs, so anywhere between 800 and 2800 RPMs, again, plus or minus 300 RPM. How they can manage to have the specs that far out for 300 RPM does concern me a little bit. Normally you'd see plus or minus like a few percent, but yeah, that's quite a lot. Anyway, moving on. So when it comes to socket compatibility, this thing actually ticks a lot of boxes. So realistically, if you are buying this, it's going to last you a long time. Obviously, should the pump last the distance. So it works with pretty much all sockets from AM3, AM2+, all that kind of stuff. AM4 and AM5 is supposedly going to be the same fitting as AM4, so we shouldn't have any issues there. On the Intel side of things, pretty much everything from the 11.5X range right up to the LGA 1700, which this does come included with an LGA 1700 style bracket, which is basically just a remodified version of their original one, so no problems there. You can also potentially use this with Threadripper should you wish to. There is actually a mounting bracket available, so you can convert the head so it will fit on Threadripper processors. Whether or not it would be suitable for that implementation, I'm not sure. I've never owned one, but certainly it is a potential. On the back of the box, it gives you a kind of a heads up of how things could potentially look in your system. So obviously they put it in an NZXT case with an NZXT motherboard and lots of fans and stuff to make it all look very pretty. Fair warning, ours probably won't look quite as pretty as that, but certainly we will give it a go. It does say about the things you can do there, so obviously you can link it up with the CAM software to control your addressable RGB and all that kind of good stuff. So yeah, actually quite interested to see how this actually performs. So let's go through and see what we actually get inside the packaging. Right, so let's see what we get in our egg carton. So first of all, let's take a look. We've got some accessories here. Accessories bags. We've also got a instruction guide, which I guess is going to be quite useful, especially for me because I've never done one of these before. And yet we've got a huge sheet of instructions there, so hopefully that's going to be useful. Also included, as we said, are the two NZXT fans. These actually, when I first looked at them, they don't look like they're going to move a great deal of air. They are rated for static pressure of up to, I think it's 2.71 H2O, which actually doesn't seem too bad, but it does seem like the fans themselves are set up more for airflow than they are static pressure due to how the blades are laid out. But anyway, we will soon find out. Does seem to be a decent quality unit, no flex to it at all. Looks really well made and finished actually in a really unusual type of pattern. or finish. So we've got kind of like almost like a greyish black colour there with a little bit of a satin hue to it. And you've got things like the 4-pin PWM connector, and also the cables themselves are sleeved and braided, which is quite a nice thing to see. Next up, we've got the actual radiator itself and also the pump assembly. So the radiator is a 280mm radiator, like we said, so it's going to take two 140mm fans on there. You can, if you want to, use it in a push-pull configuration if you've got enough headroom in your case or at the front of your chassis, depending on obviously how you're mounting it. You do have a nicely embossed NZXT logo on the sides there, and that is on both sides, so depending which way round you mount it, it's absolutely fine. The pipes actually seem to be nice and flexible, so that's going to be good for managing those as we go on through the build. And then we get to the actual pump head itself. So the pump head, the first thing I noticed actually is the fact that the pipes actually move very freely in there. So that's going to be good for, again, for management of those pipes when it's installed. One of the key selling features, I guess, of its time when this came out was the section here. So that is RGB illuminated, and also it's got the NZXT logo. It's got a kind of mirror finish on it, so it gives you that kind of depth of field type effect or infinity look. So that's really cool. And also, like I said, it is rotatable, so you can just rotate it to get the actual NZXT logo exactly how you want it. Moving around to the back, so on the back we've got a plastic cover which is over the cold plate, which comes off and does reveal some pre-applied thermal paste. So you don't get any thermal paste included. It is pre-applied using the kind of almost like the blob method, I guess, now that it's flattened out. You can also see the cold plates finished quite nicely as well. Just to the side here, we've actually got our mounting bracket. So this is coming straight out of the box with the Intel bracket on there. If you want to remove it, all you do is just twist it slightly, and then it unlocks, and you can see there's teeth all around the outside edge there. So you put it in slightly on an angle and twist it, and then you can get it to wherever you want to. Clearly, because of their notches all the way around, you can have it pretty much how you want to. So if you've got a motherboard where the pipes won't fit on one side because of VRMs or RAM clearance issues or whatever it might be, then you can do it however you see fit. Traditionally, I guess you would have it on with the pipes on the side, but again, you can do it however you want to. On the side is the connectivity, so we've got two sections here. So one is USB power, and also that connects up to your motherboard as well for control within the CAM software. And there's also a kind of an output there, so that's going to be your addressable RGB outputs, which you can then daisy chain other CAM supported or NZXT supported equipment, such as the fans, etc, etc, LED strips, whatever you want to do, however you want to fill out your build. So that's out of the way. Let's take a look at our accessories bags here and see what we actually get. So in this first bag there are 3 cables. So the first one is SATA power, so that's SATA power for controlling everything. Again, it does take kind of USB power as well from a USB header, which we'll take a look at shortly. But you've also got the output there, so that is output to other CAM devices. You've got the USB bit, which, well, USB style type connector, which plugs into the side of the unit. And also there is a 3-pin style fan header, which is basically your pump header, so that's going to relay the rotational speed of the pump to the software in the CAM so you can monitor it and all that kind of good stuff. So yeah, that's all good. Next one up is a Pwm Fan Hub Splitter, or fan doubler, tripler, whatever you want to call it. So this actually has got 3 outputs on it. So you can plug in 3 fans, and it's got a single kind of input, PWM style, so you can connect up to 3 fans on here. Clearly this is only using 2 fans, so you just connect up 2 of the headers. This is obviously included in the kind of the 360mm rads, etc, and 420s, that kind of stuff. And the last one is our micro USB to USB header. So that is something to actually bear in mind with this. If you've got a motherboard which perhaps only has one USB 2.0 output on it, you may need to get a splitter because this will use one of the headers. It does actually only use one, so potentially if you've got a case where you've got maybe a card reader or some other USB 2.0 device, you could potentially, if you wanted to, just redo the pins, take the pins out of here and combine them with another plug, because this is only using a single channel of the header, or you can get splitters very easily. I'll try and link those in the video description below, along with obviously all of this as well. So if you do need a splitter so you can get more USB 2.0 headers, then that is going to be available for you. So yeah, pretty good, no problems there. Now let's look at the fitting hardware. There's actually quite a lot in here, but that is because it does fit an absolute massive range of coolers and sockets and all that kind of stuff. So we've got our specific Intel LGA 1700 standoffs there. In this bag there are the thumb screws and also some other mounting pillars for other Intel sockets. Next up, we've got some standoffs there. So this is for the AM4 setup. It does say AM4 on there. You can use this with like AM2+, AM3, AM4, and obviously potentially AM5 as well, as we head into AM5 coming up very shortly. Next up, there's a package of screws and bolts. So these are going to be for mounting the radiator to the case and also for attaching the fans to the radiator itself. This is our AM4, AM3, AM5 kind of bracket. So this is the one which we clamp onto the pump head and locks into place, and then you've got the usual screws to attach it to the actual AM4 backplate, or AM5 backplate technically. Next up, there is the Intel backplate. So if you're using an Intel setup, because you don't really have a backplate, normally you have those push-through pins. So this goes onto the back of the motherboard, and this supports LGA 1700 straight away. So if you want to use LGA 1700, just move these into the outermost position, which I think they're actually in already as default. If you're using LGA 15X or something else, 1200s, then you can just move these along. They just slide into place, so you should find no problems at all there. It is plastic, but yeah, should do the job. So there you go, there's all the kit unboxed. Let's get on and install this thing. So this is our donor system. So this is a Ryzen 9 3900X. We've got the Asus Tough Gaming X570 Plus motherboard there. I've already taken the fans at the front, so we're going to be going for a front mounted option on this particular setup. We've already got a fan on the back, as you can see there, so yeah, I thought I'd just put it in the front there. And also the fact that because this is a 280mm radiator, actually trying to get it to fit in the top of most cases is hard work, and in this particular case it's basically impossible. It'll do a 240 no problems, but 280s do generally cause an issue. So what we need to do first of all is to remove the standard lugs from the AM4 motherboard. So we're just going to undo these 4 screws. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and remove these plastic brackets. Now, top tip when you're doing this, if you take off the bottom one or one at the top one, just leave one connected. Get these put on at this point now, and that will actually stop the backplate falling off. So if you're using this in the upright or you've got it flat on a desk, so this is going to be really helpful. So that'll mean that the top section won't fall out. So once you've got those installed, you can then go ahead and take the top one out. So there you go, we've taken all the brackets out now, and see the back plate is actually still fully in position. So we can just tighten these up. These only need to be done hand tight. Don't need to use any spanners or screws or anything on them. You can do if you want to, just to give it an extra tighten, but you should find that that's going to be absolutely fine. So the next part is to work out where you're actually going to put the radiator. Now in this particular instance, I've got to mount it with the pipes being at the top, which is not ideal. Ideally, I would have liked them to have been at the bottom, but due to some of the limitations of the actual case that we're using here, if I try and do that, there's not really enough drop there to try and get it in. It's actually catching on some of the cabling at the top, so for ease of use and for this particular demonstration, I'm going to be mounting it with the pipes at the top. So you should end up with something looking very similar to this. Now we could, if we wanted to, move it back a little bit, but because of the limitations of this particular chassis, what we're going to do is we're going to get our fans and we're going to mount them like this, and we're going to use the long screws to attach the fans through the chassis into the radiator. So you're going to grab your long screws like these, just put one screw through the top here, and then roughly line up the radiator with some appropriate holes. So back there is fine. And then we're going to get one screw slightly started. And actually I could do the other one at the top here as well. Just do a couple of turns just to actually fix it in. We're not going to be doing a full fix and fit at the moment. We're going to get all the fans installed and then we'll line it up a little bit more and see what it's like. And there we go, that is our radiator installed. So the next thing we can do is we can get the fan connection. So this is our fan splitter cable. And what we're going to want to do is take our fan cables here and route them through the case. So luckily there is a hole just there for this particular one, so I can just take that straight through. And that one has got a hole also, a very similar sort of place. So I'll take those both straight through there. So that gives us our two connections, and this is our fan connector. So we're going to plug those straight into there. And then we can plug in this last PWM cable. This is going to go into your CPU fan header. On this particular board, our CPU fan header is at the top here, so I'm going to pass this through. And I'm just going to plug that in. This particular board does actually have two headers at the top there, so if I wanted to, I could have ran both the cables just directly into CPU fan and CPU fan optional. That would have done essentially the same thing, but I'll use the splitter on this instance. So now the next thing to do is we can actually plug in our connections to the actual pump head itself. So we've got our micro USB here and our kind of almost like a USB type connection there. So let's first of all grab one of those. So this is the kind of USB style connection. So what we're going to want to do is to plug this into here. It is actually notched on the side. Hopefully you can just about make out that. So it'll only physically fit in one way. And just line it up. And push it into position. You should see that the actual connection fits in and sits actually flush. So you just about see the wires coming out the side. The next one we're going to do is going to be the USB connection. So this is like a micro USB style header or connection. So we're going to plug that straight in and that just locks into place. So what I think is probably going to be a good idea, we'll get the actual pump on the processor and then we'll do the wiring after. So now what we're going to want to do is to actually remove this plastic section, and we're going to take off the Intel bracket. Obviously if you're installing this on the Intel setup, then leave it on there. All we want to do is to push it in a little bit and twist. So anti-clockwise. When you want to lock it in, you twist it clockwise. So that's what it takes, a little turn. So remove that one and we'll put on the Amd Back Plate. So I want it so that the pipes are going to be kind of perpendicular or horizontal or whatever it is to the actual bracket. So if we put it on there and just twist it into position, and the pipes will be on the side. So now when it's actually going to be installed, it's going to be something like that with all these cables coming out the top, and then I'll route those down the back of the motherboard. So in order to attach the pump head, I'm going to use these large thumb screws here. And I'm just going to get the pump head and put it roughly in position. And I would suggest once you put it on, just hold it in place with the finger or thumb and then just get one of the screws attached. So that way the pump head isn't going to have a tendency to try and want to pull off or pull away, which meaning you might have to actually redo your thermal paste. Just do it up, don't do it up tight, just up to the start of the thread. And do that in a kind of opposing angles. In fact, this one I'm going to disconnect the USB because it's actually right in the way of the thumb screw. And on this last one we'll give it a few more turns and then we can go around in a crisscross pattern, making sure they're all tight. Now some people have actually suggested that when you do this, actually, even though they are thumb screws, it's a good idea to go around with a screwdriver after and just give it a little bit of extra torque. You can't over tighten them, they only go to a certain point on the thread and then it stops. So now we can plug in our USB cable again and then we can run the cable out the back of the case through probably the same section as where your EPS power cable goes for your motherboard power. Just feed that on up through there. And actually you're going to do the same with the other ones as well. One that I'm not going to do is going to be our pump header, because that one's actually going to go down on the other side, down to here. So this cable here with the 2 pins wired, the 3-pin one, that is for our pump. So this motherboard is actually down here. So I can plug that in there and then just tuck the cable down. So that is this side done. Now what we're going to do, we're going to spin the PC round and we're going to connect up the SATA connection. We've also as well, we've got the USB connection. So I'm going to tuck this back up round and go underneath. Luckily this board does actually have 2 USB headers in there. So I'm just going to put that around there for now. We've also got our extra connection for the RGB should you want to use it, so you can just tuck that out of the way for now because we don't have any additional RGB. So all we need to do is find a SATA connection. So we've got a SATA hub here and there's another SATA plug, so I'm just going to plug that into there and then we can tuck that back in. Again, cable management, we can do all that at a later date, but this is just to get it up and running and do some tests. So at the moment now we've got this USB 2 header here, which we'll plug in. Our connection is down at the bottom of the motherboard, which most people's will probably be in a similar position. These connections are keyed, so it only physically fit in one way. And there's that. Shame the cable actually isn't kind of color coded right up to the end, especially seeing NZXT are such sticklers for style and fashion. But yet they've left a little bit of ketchup and mustard showing there. So now that is it. Now all we need to do, we can do the peel. And now we can get this fired up. We'll put a graphics card in and we'll do some testing, see what the thermals are like. Okay, so the installation is done and the testing has been completed and we got some results for you. And I've got to say, actually a pretty painless task. The only thing which might be painful is if you're using a case which doesn't fit a 280mm radiator. I cannot stress that enough. Do make sure you check with your sizing before you go ahead and do it. Actually, when I did it, I was like, oh, I don't think this case fits a 280. But yeah, getting in the front was absolutely fine. Would have loved to be able to put it in the top, but it is what it is. Installation, very easy. The actual design for the mounting system for AM4, cream of the crop, absolutely love it. Very, very straightforward, very easy to do. It needs, I think, 6 individual components to do the whole job, so that is fantastic. Cabling wise, not entirely convinced that we need enough cables go into the pump head there. Wish there was a better way of doing that. It does seem that there's a lot of cables coming out of it, and for some people you may find that very difficult to cable manage, but yeah, it kind of is what it is. And actually when the system's on, as you can see, it looks fine. Most of the cables kind of disappear into the background. Mostly your eye is taken by obviously the rotatable display on the front and also the pipework. Now before you get off your high horses and say, why have you mounted the radiator pipes up? There wasn't any choice. Unfortunately in this case, because of the way it's cut out at the bottom, the pipes just wouldn't fit. It just wasn't going to happen. I would have much preferred to have done it pipes down, which is the preferable way of doing it if you possibly can, if you're mounting it in a vertical situation. But yeah, sadly I couldn't do, so yeah, this was for testing purposes. And speaking of testing purposes, we should talk about some of the results, so let's get into that. So looking at the results, first of all, there are 2 sets of tests. So we've done, first of all, we've got a test with the system just running Pwm speeds, which is kind of my custom curve, which I always use. So it's like 20% at 20 degrees, right the way up to 60%, 60 degrees, and then when we get up to 70 degrees, 100%. That is basically what I do on pretty much every single test I do. I also did it against a 100% fan speed, so that is the pump, the fans, everything running full blast, just to see if there's actually any meaningful difference running it at full blast, which, to be honest with you, generally most of the time there isn't. And also, I should say as well, I probably wouldn't want to run this at full blast. The fans themselves, although they're rated as being relatively quiet, the actual noise when it's running at full blast is pretty offensive, and you certainly won't want to be anywhere near it. If the PC is just left rendering or something, it'll be absolutely fine. But if you're actually sitting next to it, or you've got it kind of this sort of distance, then you will find it very discomforting. Is probably the best way of saying it. It is very, very loud. But actually you don't really need to. So let's look at the test. So with the normal fan curve, we've got a low of 35.4 degrees Celsius. This is with our Ryzen 9 3900, and the highest temperature recorded was 67.4, and this is during a 5-minute loop of Cinebench R23. When we go over to running the fan at full speed, we get a low of 33.9, so dropped almost 2 degrees there. And if we look at the high temperature, we did drop down to 65.8. So again, almost 2 degrees off there. That's a very slight difference. I personally wouldn't bother doing it. I think this is perfectly suited running around about sort of 65 to 75% of maximum capacity, especially for this processor, and the results were basically identical. Speaking of which, let's take a look at the Cinebench results. So with the Pwm speeds, we've got a Cinebench score of 18273, and with the high speed or full speed fans, we've got a Cinebench score of 18255, which bizarrely we did drop a few points, but that is kind of Cinebench. It does have those weird, wonderful things where sometimes it'll do something if a system resource is being hogged elsewhere. Not really the ideal way of testing what a processor is capable of, but for generating heat and that kind of stuff, it's absolutely fine. and does give you a ballpoint idea of how well the system is performing. So there you go. Overall, actually, yeah, quite impressed. I wasn't expecting to be, I'll be honest with you. I've never really looked into NZXT's products. The whole cam thing, I'm not overly keen on that, and their custom RGB, all that sort of stuff. I do prefer a more open system, so anything that uses the 3-pin 5-volt addressable RGB header is definitely a win from me. But for some people, that isn't always the case. Maybe you like to be into an ecosystem, in which case NZXT has got possibly one of the best on the market, in my honest opinion, if you're looking for a kind of closed-in ecosystem. But what I think isn't important, what you think is, so let us know what you think about this one in the comments section below. Again, thanks to Dave Aiken for letting us borrow this to do some quick tests on it before you put it into your office PC, and hope it settles into its office very nicely and isn't too loud at full blast. So I've been Mike, this is Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and hopefully we'll catch you in the very next video. Thanks for watching.